Our next guest has been a comic book lover since he was a child, but he didn't always see himself reflected in those stories. Today, he helps others find that representation through a carefully curated selection of comic books available at his store. Byron Kennedy, the owner of Coast Cosmos Comicbook Company, says he wants the stories he sells to reflect the community he sells them to. You grew up in the 70s and 80s. I can relate, okay? Right. But, you know, and at that time, there weren't as many distractions as we have today, but right. Comics were like a super cool thing. What was your first comic?
My first comic book was The Amazing Spider-Man. Yeah, and I've been hooked ever since.
Yeah, and that is a big one. And there's a difference between, I know a lot of us would grab the comics from the newspaper, but then an actual comic book.
Yes, the difference between a comic strip and a comic book is simply just how many pages there are. Comic books are typically 28 to 32 pages, as where a comic strip is just something that's featured in your local newspaper.
Yeah. All right. Over the years, we've seen the comic book heroes' popularity just kind of exponentially increase, and part of that was because of the film industry.
Right.
And so what you had in your hand was now up on the screen, and you could connect the dots of all of those. But why do you think it is that we're so attracted to it? Even people who don't really read comic books often will look at one and nostalgia sets in, or you're drawn to one.
Right. So typically what we've seen throughout our pop culture is things like television, movies that have been influenced and adapted from comic books. What we're seeing now with the whole Marvel Cinematic Universe and DC, Wonder
and the
Woman.
Whole evil versus good.
Good versus evil, exactly.
Yeah. All right, you have a number of comic book series. You mentioned earlier you didn't necessarily, we just didn't see ourselves reflected in those comics.
True.
But some of those comic books have been there, we just didn't know it. I'm gonna say like this one right here.
Right, so All Negro Comics is it's historically it is the first black comic book publication that came out in 1947. Last year, 2022, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of the publication of All Negro Comics.
Yeah, this is so cool. Is this a collector's one, or can I pick it up and look at it?
No, you can pick it up. Yeah, absolutely.
I know there are some things that are like, you don't touch it, right? But looking in here, speaking of the don't touch it, what is the one comic book that you want that's not in your hands or in your store yet?
Oh gosh, the original version of this would be like the perfect get for any comic book collector, because All Negro Comics, when it was published in 1947, became one of the rarest original comic books because there was only one single issue of that anthology series. So there are about 100 copies of it out somewhere in the ether now, and that's it.
Yeah. Have you ever spoken to somebody who got that as a child, who looked at it as a child, and how that impacted them to see themselves as a superhero?
All the time. So when people come into the shop, whether they are, you know, adults or seniors, we have senior citizens that come into the shop because it just brings back the sense of nostalgia, like you said, and kids that come into the shop. There was one little girl, she was so cute. She was about 3 or 4 years old. She had little afro puffs, and she came into the shop and she saw, the first thing that she saw was a cover of Moon Girl from Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur, and she looked at the cover and she grabbed it and she went to her mom and she said, me, mommy, me.
Yeah. That does it.
That's
Yeah. It's like when I saw Eartha Kitt back then, I was like, oh, there you go, Catwoman. Right there I am.
Yeah.
Right. What are some of the other books that you want to point out here?
Some of the other books that we love to feature in the shop are our independent and local comic book creators, because we like to think of ourselves as, of course, you know, that comic book shop, your favorite friendly neighborhood comic book shop. But in addition to that, we like to think of ourselves as a creator incubator space where locals can come and feature their comic books inside the shop, where they typically don't get a lot of shelf
and it's so
space.
interesting too. There's so many kids we talk about all the time dealing with things like dyslexia, ADHD, and the whole bit who don't like to read. But when they get a hold of a comic book and it's got the narrative and the pictures and the words, somehow the reading can become easier, and sometimes that's the introduction to them reading well.
That is true. So as an educator myself, that's my secret identity.
Yeah, what's that secret identity?
So I'm a professor. I teach marketing out of the College of Business.
Yeah, look at you bearing the lead up there, okay?
So as an educator, the one thing that we do champion, my pet project and my pet passion project is literacy, arts and literacy, and having comic books as a resource and a medium for engaging both hemispheres of the brain is something that it's almost magical. When you see kids that are reluctant readers.
I have that kid. It is magical because that's what he did.
It is most magical.
Yeah, and he got a chance to meet Stan Lee.
Yeah.
It was at Comicpalooza. He was like, he met Stan Lee and it all came together for him.
Right.
Besides comics, you also have all kinds of other things at the store.
Oh, yes. So No Good Comic Book Shop is without collectible items, whether they are a large statue. This is like one of our smaller statues, but we also have Funko Pops. Funko Pops and coffee mugs, pins, T-shirts.
Everything for the comic book lover.
Everything for the comic book lover.
So you can find it at Comicpalooza, but you can find you all year long.
All year long.
All right. For more information about Gulf Coast Cosmos Comic Book Company, visit greatdayhouston.com and we will connect you.